In the audience for Samson was young Horace Walpole, admittedly partisan as an enthusiast for Italian opera. He mocked the new audience, saying that all they really liked was the hallelujahs and anything resembling a hearty tune. He even accused Handel of hiring the singers who normally sang the roast beef of Old England in the intervals at other theatres.
When mighty roast beef was the Englishman's food, it ennobled our hearts and enriched our blood. Our soldiers were brave and our soldiers were good. Oh, the roast beef of Old England.
Hogarth's painting, known as The Roast Beef of Old England, reflects the current nationalism and scorn of foreigners. The sight of a good English side of beef, taken ashore at Calais, prompts a look of greed from a finger-licking French friar and astonishment from a skinny soldier, while a Highland Scot, a supporter of the Stuart Pretender, living in exile, is reduced to the life of a beggar. France and the Stuarts together represented a constant threat to Hanoverian England. But in 1746, Handel, together with everyone else in London, heard news of a victory which would put an end to this Stuart threat. Never the man to miss an opportunity, Handel set to against the clock, writing an oratorio to celebrate the event. Judas Maccabeus provided the theme. In one sense, it was an odd choice. Judas had led a victorious uprising of the Jews, but the victory now to be celebrated had put down an uprising, that of the Jacobite Scots. It didn't matter. One of the reassuring rules of English oratorio was that the winning side always stood for England. The leader of the uprising was the Stuart Pretender, Bonnie Prince Charlie. Sailing almost alone from France, he set about raising a Highland army to reclaim his family's throne. He achieved several successes, defeating an English army at Preston Pans, and marching as far south as Derby before dwindling support made it seem wise to retreat north again. By now, he was being pursued by his distant cousin, the Duke of Cumberland, a son of King George II. History may remember him as Butcher Cumberland, but this was to be the English hero whom Handel would now set about glorifying in his oratorio. The event to be celebrated was when the two armies, pitifully ill-matched, finally met near Inverness at Culloden. The dream, that of a charismatic return to claim his inheritance, was about to lapse into nightmare. Charles had marched his men on a futile expedition all through the night, hoping to surprise Cumberland, who had paused to celebrate his 25th birthday. Exhausted and outnumbered 2-1, the Scots stood no chance. Of the English, only 50 died. Of the Scots, more than 1,000. It was a grisly end to what had been a long and bitter story. The title of Butcher derived not so much from the battle as from the brutality with which Cumberland mopped up any remaining pockets of resistance. But after news of his victory had reached London, there could be no doubt who was meant when Handel's chorus greets Judas Maccabeus as a conquering hero. And nobody was much bothered about what might be happening in distant Scotland. It was not only as a composer that Handel excelled. Ever since his earliest years, travelling around Europe in search of patrons, he had also been widely appreciated for his skill as a performer, on the keyboard and above all on the organ. Now in his 50s, his skill in this respect was a famous part of London's musical scene. The occasion of a Handel oratorio in the theatre would usually feature a virtuoso performance by the composer during the interval. It would take the form of an organ concerto with an improvised voluntary by Handel himself as an introduction. Then, noted a contemporary, he would perform the solo part in the concerto with a degree of spirit and firmness that no one ever pretended to equal. While Britain had been busy with the Jacobite rebellion, the armies of Europe had been trying to establish who should succeed to the throne of Austria. The resulting treaty was to provide further cause for celebration from the point of view of the British royal family. The late 1740s were proving a good time for patriotic men and women loyal to the Hanoverian cause. And the natural place in London for some well-earned public celebration was St. James's Park. Handel's music for the royal fireworks was composed to celebrate the Peace of Aix-la-Chapelle, signed in 1749. The war had been mainly concerned with settling the Austrian succession, but the peace did include one local detail of great interest to Britain. For the first time, all the powers of Europe agreed in writing that the Georges, I and II, were the rightful heirs to the throne, both here and in Hanover. Cause indeed for a lavish display of Catherine wheels and rockets in the park beside the Royal Palace of St. James. A wooden structure in the style of a Roman triumphal arch was put up for the occasion, 140 feet long and 115 feet high. During the actual display, the machine, as it was called, accidentally caught fire. The exotically named fireworks, whether honoris, caduceus or girandole, could prove less than safe. Contemporary accounts tell of pieces of spent rocket weighing more than 1.5 pounds falling on the rejoicing crowds. The preparations involved several lengthy disputes, including one between the king and Handel as to what type of music. The king wanted only military instruments, trumpets and French horns. Above all, he hoped there would be no fiddles. But Handel, or so reported the Duke, who was master of the ordnance, which meant in charge of explosives of all kinds, Handel was very much inclined to violins. The Duke even spelt it E-E-N-S, which made them sound even more prissy. No one knows who won. Strings appear in some places, in others they are scratched out. Clearly a very good time was had by almost everyone. And though nobody left us an account of Mr. Handel's music, it must clearly have added very greatly to the sense of celebration, with or without violins. When an 18th century evening is held today in a National Trust garden, the delights on offer are those that Londoners of that time most enjoyed. For a place to eat, to flirt, to stroll, and above all to listen to music, a pleasure garden was the natural choice. The oldest and best known of all the gardens was Vauxhall,